As the start of a new era, the episode wastes no time to get the theme out of the way. There's a very mid-2000s feel to this intro as the TARDIS swoops through the time vortex only for the iconic machine to enter slow motion, spin, and enter a more fiery and chaotic vortex. It's almost as if the intro has an ego of its own, saying, "Look how cool I am." And honestly, yeah, for me it's pretty cool. I think there's something about the focus being on the colours of the vortex that allows this opening to hold up even today. The more aggressive turn halfway through sets the tone of action and something bombastic. Murray Gold spares no time, blasting the theme song to an almost epic level, presenting us with a serious and almost eerie tone as it fades out. Then we're met with a shot depicting the Earth from space, before the shot zooms right into our protagonist's alarm clock. Not even a minute in and we already have a pretty good idea of who we're dealing with here thanks to the set design. An untidy bedroom is often an indicator of an untidy mindset, someone who's either too busy to look after themselves or can't bring themselves to do so because they're just who they are. Immediately afterwards, much like the frantic pacing of the opening and the first shot, the episode doesn't slow down here as we cut to Rose, our protagonist, kissing her mother Jackie goodbye as she rushes off to work. Following this, we get a quick time-lapse shot of a busy London street showcasing the lifestyle of the people in Rose's neighbourhood. This is probably a good time to say that most good narratives attempt to set up the status quo before ripping it away from our main characters. We had a small glimpse of space only to be slammed back down to reality and then see Rose rush off into her daily routine. The implication is that things are going to change for the characters we're focusing on. Not too surprising, but the score playing at this point is almost like pop music, only for the more alien segments of the track to bleed through. Similar to the opening but in reverse. There's something almost uncanny valley about the track being used, but keep in mind that the music is my weakest subject here when it comes to media, so take that with a pinch of salt and most things I say in regards to the music going forward. As Rose whizzes about her day, the camera pans to some display dummies, which by themselves is an awkward choice. Of course, it's a Doctor Who episode, and that means that there is a very deliberate reason for the scene to draw attention to them. This also works in an alternative way, as Rose is then seen running into the store, supposedly attending a job there as she's placing an item of clothing on a shelf. She sighs, indicating that Rose isn't a huge fan of her current career, and we then cut to Rose and her boyfriend Mickey hanging out on her lunch break. The pacing of the episode slows down shortly after we see Rose return to work, along with the announcement that the store will be closing shortly, but what I like in particular here is how it's only the shots of Rose that seem to be calming down, but the rest of the world is still firing on all cylinders. It should probably be noted at this point there is something very obvious going on here. As much as I like Billie Piper as an actress, it's really the music and the editing that's carrying this opening. And in fact, the idea that Rose sort of blends in with everyone else in the routine-filled world we've just witnessed is a great way to convey how topsy-turvy things are going to get for her and the audience by proxy. She's relatable in the way that she's very ordinary, or at least her lifestyle is. That being said, we're 2 minutes in and all of this has been on full steam ahead. For those who know what's about to come, we pretty much know that Rose's regular troubles are sort of put on the back burner from this point forwards. That's not to say they're gone completely, but in an episode that's 44 minutes long and 2 minutes of that acting as pre-ramble to get us somewhat familiar with the status quo, we sure are in a rush to kick things off. As of now, that's not a bad thing, as we do have to keep in mind that this isn't just the start of a new series but revival to the show as a whole. The Doctor, the TARDIS, the show's premise and the adventure of the week all have to be crammed within these 44 minutes, so if anything has to be sacrificed at this point, Rose's work and social life was probably the safest choice, as these are things that can still be developed in future episodes if need be. And once again, these aren't completely gone from this episode, just minimised. For now, we'll continue with the episode and discuss things as they pop up. Rose is sent down to the basement of the shop in order to give her co-worker lottery money. The ding of the elevator cues the music to stop and leaves us alone with Rose. A motif that Murray Gold likes to use before something otherworldly occurs is something akin to that of a dog whistle, a type of screech to set the viewers on edge. As Rose moves closer and closer down the lonely corridor, the sound only gets louder. Our introduction to Rose's name is given by her trying to call out to her co-worker, which I quite like.
Hello, Wilson, it's Rose!
In something like this, the most mundane of information can oddly be the most difficult to convey to the audience without it sounding unnatural. Talking to someone, especially someone you already know, can make relaying information really awkward, especially if it's something that's casual. You don't walk up to your friends and reintroduce yourself every time, so having the introduction to this episode's threat coincide with the reveal of Rose's name is a smart choice. As Rose wanders into one of the storerooms, she flicks on a light switch, revealing a load of mannequins with plenty of claustrophobic shots to accompany them, and Rose's ascent through the room. In retrospect, this is incredibly eerie with the knowledge we already have, but as imagery by itself, it still manages to convey something unsettling. It's almost as if the humanoid figures of the mannequins blur the line between Rose and the viewer feeling alone yet watched at the same time. The door shutting by itself is an old school horror trick to trap the protagonist in a potentially horrible situation, but this moment kind of falls flat on rewatch as there's no explanation as to why this happened. It's more of a contrived way to move things forward, and unfortunately this isn't the last time something like this happens in this episode. Thankfully these moments are few and far between, but when you notice them they do kind of stick out. Fortunately they're not plot holes, but something going unexplained can be as equally head-scratching. You could argue that someone closed the door from the other side, but we can clearly see that's not the case. Still, it's contrived, but not necessarily a plot hole. Then we have our first introduction to the villains of the week, the Autons. Even if they're unnamed. The sound of rubber squeaking as they move almost sounds like a creaking floorboard. It's simple but effective at making the very basic act of them moving unnerving. Their slow but stiff movements enforces this as well. The tension comes from their numbers instead of how fast they move. I'm still not entirely sure as to why they were attempting to kill Rose here. You could argue it's because she's seen them, but if they just stood still, none of this would have happened. One could argue it's to do with the Doctor's presence though. Once again, these things aren't really explained, but it's not like an explanation can't be contrived. We then get our first introduction to the Ninth Doctor, played by Christopher Eccleston, as he grabs Rose's hand and simply tells her to run. This is more of a subjective thing, but the scene is slightly undercut for me when you can see the extras trying their best to keep up with the pair, but their costumes limit them to a light jog. I don't find this bad, just funny to notice in a rewatch. To be honest, the following scene of the Doctor popping the arm off an attacking Auton sets the tone well enough to know that a level of goofiness can be expected here. As long as the tone of each scene is well managed, I'm completely fine with this. Besides, the way he tosses it to Rose gets a chuckle out of me every time as he informs her that it's plastic.
Pull his arm off.
Yep. Plastic.
We can take this as the Doctor trying to show Rose that the Autons aren't human, but the alternative is not only more plausible but funny. The alternative being that he's just saying what's on his mind and Rose just happens to be there. Rose then plays the straight person and tries to rationalise what just happened, but the Doctor is very quick to shut most of her suggestions down.
Very clever, nice trick. Who are they then? Students? Is this a student thing or what?
Why would there be students?
I don't know.
Well, you said it. Why students?
Because to get that many people dressed up and being silly, they gotta be students.
That makes sense. Well done.
Thanks.
They're not students.
Whoever they are, when Wilson finds them, he's gonna call the police.
Who's Wilson?
Chief electrician.
Wilson's dead.
What I like most about the scene is how the Doctor retorts in a way that's trying to get Rose to think about what she's saying. It's quick, but he's not insulting her intelligence at this moment. He even congratulates her for making a logical point, even if it's wrong, and he's not fussed with pointing that out.
Why would there be students?
I don't know.
Well, you said it. Why students?
Because to get that many people dressed up and being silly, they gotta be students.
That makes sense. Well done.
It's almost as if he's prioritising Rose getting into a specific frame of mind before talking her through it properly. This is immediately followed up with the Doctor telling Rose that her co-worker is dead in a rather blunt manner.
They're not students.
Whoever they are, when Wilson finds them, he's gonna call the police.
Who's Wilson?
Chief electrician.
Wilson's dead.
Already at this point we can tell that understanding the logic behind the situation at hand and solving it is more important to the character rather than the collateral along the way. It's not that he doesn't care, as he clearly shows some form of nicety, but not insulting Rose and showing some form of care for her as he shields her eyes when using the sonic screwdriver.
It's not funny, that's it!
Hold on, mind your eyes.
I've had enough of this now!
It's done more out of a sense of urgency. For all he knows in this scene, he's about to leave Rose forever, so there's no sense in leaving her to wonder about her friend, and at the same time there's no reason to lie to her about what's going on, especially when he's proven that she can rationalise things for herself. In a way, this means that even if the Doctor went along with Rose's assumption that the Autons were just students, it would only be a matter of time before she started questioning things further. Granted, he doesn't tell her what's going on immediately, but from the information that we've ascertained of his character, the Doctor is more likely trying to ease her into what's happening rather than scare her or potentially leave her in disbelief. This may sound like I'm reaching, but this is the kind of thing you notice when you watch this enough. Not everyone will pick up on this, and for those that do, they may not even have the words to describe the subtext of the scene, and that's one of the reasons why I'm doing this. You'd hope that if you thought of it, the writer must have done so at some point as well. Then you can start moving forward in a sort of pattern where the episode and its characters move along in a logical direction that makes sense when looking at it in retrospect. That's what we call consistency, and it's an important part of keeping us immersed in the moment of the episode. We now have a form of baseline to work with when it comes to both the Doctor and Rose, so if they diverge from what we already know, there has to be a good reason for it, otherwise that's a character inconsistency. If the episode and the show starts ignoring the information we've already gathered, then the believability of what's happening can greatly be damaged, and as a result, it will become extremely difficult to care about what's happening. This applies to the narrative and world building as well. There's sort of an invisible rule set that's built upon the more we learn about the universe of this show, and if it was in any way broken or ignored, then the stakes of what we've been watching can be ripped in two. Yes, this is in part a fantasy and science fiction show, but the believability and relatability of shows like this is what draws us in as an audience. The Doctor is an alien, yes, but in many ways that's why they often use a human companion by their side. Through the existence of Rose, we've already gotten an idea of who the Doctor is, along with the characterization and moral code he has, and we're only 6 minutes into the episode. The writing is already sharp enough to make this something truly special, as long as it keeps up with everything we've talked about so far. Moving on with the episode, Rose chases the Doctor whilst asking who the Autons are, or rather, the plastic mannequins that are chasing after them, bearing in mind that they haven't been named or explained yet. The Doctor responds by telling her straight that they're living plastic being controlled by a relay on the roof. He then showcases that he has a bomb and that he's going to use it on them, and now things are falling into place. The Doctor is here to shut down the Autons, which explains why he's here, and the Autons are attacking him as a result. It's still too early in the episode, so we don't really know what the Doctor or the Autons' motives are yet, but it's clear that they're a danger to each other. It's also safe to assume with this information that the Autons are in this exact building because they can either blend in with the other plastic mannequins, or the relay has transformed the mannequins into Autons here. Rose's appearance here is also explained pretty decently by this. It's safe to assume that someone was going to be attacked by them eventually, and as a result someone else was going to notice that person's absence. Rose was unlucky, but this episode has already established that she has a fairly regular routine in a world that keeps ticking by. In other words, this could have happened to anyone, and we're following the unfortunate one in this scenario. It stops the circumstances from feeling like a massive convenience. Everyone has a logical reason to be where they are, and they're acting appropriately based on what we already know about them. The Doctor then uses the adrenaline of the moment to usher Rose out of the building in a way that's too quick for her to react, but he does leave her with a moment of levity, telling her to
And I might well die in the process, but don't worry about me, no. You go on, go and have your lovely beans on toast. Don't tell anyone about this, because if you do, you'll get them killed. I'm the Doctor, by the way. What's your name?
Rose.
Nice to meet you, Rose. Run for your life!
We now have confirmation that the Doctor's priority here is the safety of the innocent. He could have gotten on with his job and put Rose in harm's way, or even not warned her about the danger she could be putting someone in if they knew about what was happening. Instead, viewing the scene as a whole, the Doctor was merely putting his mission on standby whilst he was trying to save Rose first. Every comment made along the way can be viewed as a means to keep her somewhat sane and to keep her moving throughout. He even makes sure to give Rose a name before telling her to run for your life, as if to give her as much information that will get her by. This isn't just a leap made right this second, but rather an accumulation of everything we now know about the Doctor and Rose at this moment in time. The next scene encapsulates things beautifully. The bombastic music is still playing, which implies that an action set piece is still happening, and yet Rose turns a corner, catches her breath only for the world around her to move on like nothing has happened. In her head, she's still running, but the madness is over. Seconds later, the store explodes, removing what little chance Rose had to move on from the scenario. Her job and her daily routine have both been destroyed. When the episode cuts back to Rose's apartment with her mum, we get a pretty strong indicator as to what's happening in her head. Taking a lot of the emotional stuff out of the scene for a moment, her job and her normal routine have once again been destroyed, and in the panic of the situation, she brought back the plastic arm. Even if she had no motivation towards investigating what happened, she now has a constant reminder of that night and the free time to do so. It's clear that this is at the forefront of her mind as Jackie describes the situation, focusing on the domestic side of the situation, how Rose is going to get money.
Outside, didn't see anything.
It's Debbie on the end. She knows a man on the mirror, 500 quid for an interview.
Oh, that's brilliant. Give it here.
Well, you've got to find some way of making money. Your job's kaput, and I'm not bailing you out.
Meanwhile, Mickey clings to Rose only for his guys to drop and reveal that he's just trying to get her out as an excuse to watch a sports match.
She was within seconds of death.
What are you drinking, tea? Nah, that's no good, that's no good. You're in shock, you need something stronger.
I'm alright.
Now, come on, you deserve a proper drink. We're going down the pub, you and me, my tree, how about it?
Is there a match on?
No, I'm just thinking about you, babe.
There's a match on, ain't there?
I know, I said.
Well, that's not the point, but we could catch the last 5 minutes.
Go on then. I'm fine, really.
Not only has Rose got the free time and the incentive, but it's clear that no eyes are actually on her. Nothing's holding her back, you could say, and you can probably see where this is going. Most people would have some form of tie back to their life on Earth, whether that's something simple as a routine, friends or family. Rose's iteration of those things has just become extremely flexible, and as a result, there's every reason for her to make a certain decision at the end of the episode. We then see Mickey throw the plastic arm into a nearby barrel, as we get a fairly great transition into the darkness panning down only for Rose's alarm clock to swoop in. As a nice twist, the episode showcases the start of Rose's next day in a similar way to the start of the episode, only for it to immediately be halted by Jackie telling Rose that
There's no point in getting up, sweetheart. You've got no job to go to.
in a single moment her whole day has been shafted. Jackie then attempts to discuss Rose's future only for Jackie to wander off. Even if it's in another room, Rose is still being left to her own devices. Their cat flap starts to move and we can see the Doctor is trying to break in on the other side. The next scene can be taken as a moment purely for comedy when the Doctor asks what Rose is doing there.
What are you doing here?
I live here.
Well, what'd you do that for?
Because I do. I'm only home because someone blew up my job.
Another interpretation is that he just saved Rose's life the night before and now she could be in the midst of danger again. He's not annoyed by her living in her own house, as funny as that sounds, but rather he's annoyed that he went through all of that trouble of rescuing her, only for his actions to be made potentially redundant. Immediately afterwards, he jokes that she's not made of plastic and attempts to wander off, as if to keep Rose out of the loop as much as possible, only for it to drag her inside. The Doctor no longer has to break in, and as a result of the easy access to Rose's home, he can now investigate with the only risk being her involvement. The initial meeting between the Doctor and Jackie amuses me for many reasons. Firstly, because the Doctor's priorities are obviously on following the signal he tracked to this location, so his quick refusal of Jackie's
No.
are quick and to the point, which is just funny. Secondly, Rose is the one that comes up with the alibi for the Doctor as a part of an inquiry, which means he has to play along with the suggestion when traditionally it's the other way around.
It's part of the inquiry. Give us 10 minutes.
She deserves compensation.
Oh, we're talking millions.
Jackie's advances are caused by the Doctor saying that Rose will get millions because of the alibi. There's every chance that he's saying this to take the piss, or the funnier alternative with the Doctor being an alien he might not exactly have a grasp on human currency yet, so him suggesting that Rose will get millions might just be something he genuinely believes could happen. Which makes it even better that Jackie buys into it as well. I'm slightly mixed on the next scene. Rose is trying to take the situation seriously by talking about what happened, which is very in line with what we know about her, and yet the Doctor is just pissing about in the background. Yes, it's funny, but I'm still mixed on it.
If it was some sort of joke that just went wrong.
Sad ending.
His comments act as a more humorous hint that he's not human, such as being able to tell who an alien is and being able to read a book in a second, and yet his priorities were different moments ago. The Doctor taking a moment to investigate Rose and his new face is fine, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that we don't really know the severity of the situation yet. I guess you could pass it off as the Doctor thinking that Rose won't let him go, so we might as well get comfortable, but the potentially world devastating thing he was dealing with is still ongoing, and he's messing about with his ears. I think I'd understand this a little more if he was doing it for Rose's benefit, but that's not made apparent. Still, the next part gets a laugh out of me as the Doctor tussles with the plastic arm that's crawled back into the house. Rose taking the situation as the Doctor pissing about is genuinely funny to me, but the floating arm kinda takes me out of it. It's unclear how the living plastic behaves. If it can fly, then I feel like that's something it should have taken advantage of more, but I guess there's no real reason for that to happen in this episode. The running scene at the start comes to mind as their legs are actually holding them back, but once again, this is a contrivance, not a plot hole. There's enough reasonable doubt to be had on both sides that sort of comfortably negates the issue. Still, it's a great visual gag, but that bit of slapstick has given the Autons a new ability. On top of that, we could also question that if they are still as deadly when in pieces, why don't they do that more often? A full mannequin moving about is hard not to take notice of, but individual limbs moving about in the shadows and hunting the Doctor is far more deadly and scary to think about. In this case, we could contrive that when separated, they are significantly more limited to what they can do and how long they can act. The arm takes all night before it crawls back into Rose's apartment, so it's entirely possible that it's weakened. That's still a contrivance though, as the episode doesn't give us a direct answer, but important to keep in mind that this is once again not a plot hole. The Doctor disables the arm with a sonic screwdriver, and then as quickly as he arrived, he runs off with Rose hightailing behind him. Whilst they're not quite there yet in terms of accepting each other's roles in one another's life, we can see that their parts are forming. This iteration of the Doctor seems to only stick around when there's absolutely no choice and someone is potentially in danger, but he's not cruel in his dismissal of someone like Rose. He's very clearly playing with her in the sense that manipulation comes easy to him, but once again, it's not like he's leaving Rose with nothing to go on. She's just seen the plastic arm come to life and try to kill both her and the Doctor, to which the Doctor reacts by disabling the arm and attempting to calm Rose down by telling her that it's okay now, followed by some levity once again. He's not exactly upfront with the information, but still the Doctor is focusing on what Rose can clearly understand at that moment in time. Rose, on the other hand, already has changed in the short amount of time that we've met her. Gradually, bit by bit, she's coming into her own rather than remaining with her regular routine. In an instant, she's already started chasing after the Doctor with no hesitation, in large part because of what she's already experienced around him. Granted, the argument could be made that most would be curious at this moment, but let's not forget that she dragged him into her apartment. She is now an active participant in what's happening, even if she doesn't know or understand that yet. A part of me really likes how this Doctor copes with someone like Rose not giving up. He's sprinting down the staircase with her after him and asking questions only for him to simply joke back. That being said, he's opening up bit by bit. Rose asking for his name is probably the perfect example of this playing out. Rose's conversation moves from asking about what just happened to try and convince the Doctor that she's seen enough for him to trust her.
Who are you?
Told you, the Doctor.
Yeah, but Doctor what?
Just the Doctor.
The Doctor.
Hello.
Is that supposed to sound impressive?
Sort of.
Come on then. You can tell me. I've seen enough. Are you the police?
No, I was just passing through. I'm a long way from home.
The doctor responds honestly, and after a second goes by, to think about it. The levity never stops with his answers either. It's almost as if he's covering for both potential reactions Rose could have. Either she thinks it's all one big joke and this appears as if he's playing along, or she starts panicking because of the situation, in which case his light attitude when replying to her is an attempt to keep her calm. Regardless, his attempt starts to break down as the conversation goes on, with Rose becoming more insistent on getting answers, to the point where the doctor's facade begins to drop, almost as if he realises that his retorts are no longer working.
What have I done wrong? How come those plastic things keep coming after me?
Oh, suddenly the entire world revolves around you. You were just an accident. You got in the way, that's all.
It tried to kill me.
It was after me, not you. Last night in the shop, I was there. You blundered in, almost ruined the whole thing. This morning, I was tracking it down. It was tracking me down. The only reason it fixed on you is because you've met me.
So what you're saying is the entire world revolves around you?
Sort of, yeah.
You're full of it.
Sort of, yeah.
But all this plastic stuff, who else knows about it?
No one.
What, you're on your own?
Well, who else is there? I mean, you lot, all you do is eat chips, go to bed and watch telly. While all the time underneath you, there's a war going on.
The dynamic between the two is now in full swing when Rose redirects the conversation onto being about the Doctor himself, to which he tries one last time to shake her off with another light comment. In return, Rose slows the Doctor down by grabbing the plastic arm from him and lowering her tone of voice. The Doctor's casual glances back and forth to Rose transforms into him almost sizing her up. As the scene continues, the Doctor and Rose are now walking in pace with each other. She's learned how to read the Doctor and he's learned to read Rose in return. All in all, this is a scene where the two are simply walking and having a conversation, and already so much has happened. Rose has committed herself to investigating the thing that's removed the last barrier keeping her sitting still, whilst the Doctor has gone from dashing off, doing his best to leave Rose behind, with maybe a quip to keep spirits high, to being candid with her, and even allowing Rose to walk by his side. And this accumulates in the Doctor completely dropping any facade he had left and telling Rose exactly who he thinks he is.
Really though, Doctor, tell me, who are you?
Do you know, like we were saying, about the Earth revolving? It's like when you're a kid. The first time they tell you that the world's turning and you just can't quite believe it because everything looks like it's standing still. I can feel it. The turn of the Earth. The ground beneath our feet is spinning at 1,000 miles an hour. And the entire planet is hurtling around the sun at 67,000 miles an hour, and I can feel it. We're falling through space, you and me, clinging to the skin of this tiny little world, and if we let go... That's who I am. Now forget me, Rose Tyler. Go home.
Keeping in mind the wording there, who he thinks he is. A large issue most modern pieces of media tend to stumble into is self-introductions and being very literal. Saying exactly what's happening or what something is doesn't add anything to a scene and can come across as time wasters in the least offensive sense, and a showcase of how ignorant the viewers are in the worst sense. This is how you do that right. The Doctor is describing himself through his own lens, so in a way we're getting much more than we bargained for here. On the one hand, we get his perspective, but on the other, we actually get to learn a bit more about who he is, describing himself as someone who has to constantly worry about the world around him as if he's the lonely protector out of duty, when he follows it up by telling Rose to forget him. When you listen to how he says it, it's clear that he's very somber about this. He tells Rose to forget him, but he doesn't do it with any form of joy, almost as if he doesn't want anyone to get hurt by following his lead. Of course, at this point it's only speculation, but we've gathered enough information to see that this lines up pretty well. In many ways we can see that Rose has a similar idea just by looking at her expression when the Doctor walks away. On a quick side note, the music for the scene is beautiful. When a great composer can create memorable themes for most of the show's narrative elements, it not only makes individual tracks stick out more, but it becomes very easy to have the track evoke an emotion. Here, the Doctor's theme plays in the background, but after what we've just learned about him, and as the tone and levity drops to a more bittersweet one, the sound of marching drums fades in the background. The foreshadowing is on point, and here we learn more about the Doctor later on. This is very much him marching to war. I don't really have much to say about the following scene, and if I'm being honest, this is where the episode sort of drops off for me. Not massively so, as the character writing is still strong, but tonally speaking, a lot of the pieces have been set up in merely 16 minutes. We still have another 20 minutes left. There's a lot that can be done with this time, but we've very clearly got a tonal separation forming from this point onwards. Everything involved with the Autons is almost played comically, whilst the Doctor's plot is substantially more serious. The trouble we have now is tying a comfortable knot with both arcs concluding in a befitting way, but because that difference is there, it risks a tonal dissonance. The hope is that doesn't happen. We'll see. Rose asks Mickey to use his computer to research the Doctor, although it should be noted that she doesn't tell him why. Within a matter of 3 search attempts, she finds a webpage searching for information on the Doctor. Yeah, it's also the first result where the words Doctor and Blue Box are typed in. A bit contrived maybe, and I would have perhaps used a very quick time-lapse to show Rose researching rather than getting it in 30 seconds flat. Off she goes to contact Clive, the owner of the website, whilst Mickey stays behind in a car. Clive's fine. It kinda makes you wonder why there aren't more Clives in the world though. 3 web searches not only brought up his site at the #1 spot, but when we find out how he's been searching for the Doctor, it's disappointing. He just so happened to find some very public photos of the same man throughout time. You might start to see some larger holes forming, so I'll address the biggest. We know that Rose will travel with the Doctor, and we know later on that they go on adventures that aren't featured in episodes. Why isn't Rose in any of these photos as well? Bear in mind that the photos shown are of the same incarnation of the Doctor, so it makes some sense that she would be spotted in at least one of them. I do like the framing that the Doctor's constant companion is death, considering that it would be easy to misconstrue his adventures in time saving people as him being the cause of it. Other than that, I'm not sure this was needed. This especially gets muddled when Eunice is introduced in a later series, but that's yet to be established, so I won't touch that now. Let's talk about Rubber Mickey. This is exactly what I was referring to when I said that there could be a tonal dissonance. This very eerie realization is planted in Rose's head whilst Mickey is out having a fight with a bin, complete with slapstick sound effects and finished off with a burp. Rose's disbelief at what Clive tells her about the Doctor potentially being an alien and immortal is understandable enough at the moment. Keep in mind what she's seen against what she's been told. The Doctor even stated before that Rose might not realise how much of this she believes just yet, so there's no issue with seeing the cogs turn just a little more first. Okay, I ain't gonna lie. I don't know what this scene is trying to tell us. Rose doesn't even blink at the idea that Mickey is completely off visually and verbally. Is the show trying to tell me that Mickey is just that bland, or that Rose cares just that little about him?
What do you think?
So where did you meet this Doctor?
Oh, I'm sorry. Was I talking about me for a second?
Because I reckon it all started back at the shop, am I right? Was he something to do with that?
No.
Come on.
Sort of.
What was he doing there?
I'm not going on about it, Mickey. Really, I'm not. Because I know it sounds daft, but I don't think it's safe. He's dangerous.
But you can trust me, sweetheart. Babe.
Darling.
Sugar. Babe. Sugar.
He's creepy, don't get me wrong, but there's a level of intelligence that's questioned when no one pays attention to this. Especially when the goofy sound effects come out to play. I like how subtle the Doctor's appearance is here before it escalates to 100 after everyone realises it's him. The cork was originally off-putting and a bit too goofy for my liking, but at this point, if this is what Rose needs to realise he's a plastic duplicate, then I suppose it could be worse. The sheer glee on the Doctor's face when he rips off plastic Mickey's head is a nice touch, telling us that he loves what's happening really. Rose pulling the fire alarm was pretty good as well, although the Doctor just leaving the swinky arm man with pedestrians is a little eyebrow raising, even if it was after them. If the thing was a little cleverer, then it could have swung at the civilians to force the Doctor back, but we don't know how much these things know about the Doctor, I suppose. Rose's introduction to the TARDIS is about as good as it can be. A dire situation forces her to follow the Doctor inside, which allows her to just go through the motions by herself, rather than the Doctor potentially making the situation worse. The fact that we see the TARDIS through Rose's expression first is a genius idea to get us curious to see what she has. The immediate attention is drawn to the size and shape of the box as the Mickey Smasher approaches, forcing Rose to confront what she's seen.
He's gonna follow us.
The assembled hordes of Genghis Khan can get through that door, and believe me, they've tried. Now, shut up a minute.
You see, the arm.
And now we get our first look at this iteration of the TARDIS. A more subdued and slow-paced version of the Doctor's theme plays as a wide shot of the TARDIS is revealed. Rose now has little room to doubt what the Doctor has told her, and Clive's words to Rose about the Doctor's true form are slowly setting in. Should probably mention this now, we're going to refer to the TARDIS's design a little bit later on, so if it seems a bit weird I'm not mentioning it in episode, we'll get to it, don't worry. The way the Doctor just gets on with trying to break down Rose's shock is great, as he almost pauses the urgent tone in the air to address any questions she has in order to move past them. At this point in time, Rose has already put 1 and 2 together, and whilst there's only speculation about what the Doctor is, she opens up by asking if the TARDIS is alien, then if the Doctor is. Once again, the character writing is on point here. Everything involving the Doctor has been built up and with an even pace, allowing us to match where Rose is at mentally. There's not much room for her or the viewer to doubt what we've been told at this point, and in many ways what makes Rose a compelling protagonist. She's an ordinary and unbiased person who's just been introduced to this world like many people watching this for the first time. Reaching this point firmly establishes her as the window character, the one we follow because they are written to partially be us. The other half of the character is something we'll touch upon a bit later, as it's worth quickly noting that whilst we have established that she is a character, much of who she is has almost been placed aside at this point. Rose is reacting to the events before her, and that's largely it. Mostly everything else has been incidental. Once again, we'll touch upon that in a bit. If anything, the remainder of this episode seeks to amend that. When the Doctor asks if she's alright with him being an alien, she doesn't hesitate to say yes. Rose has just been given affirmation for all of hers and our speculation to this point, and her response to immediately accept it because she wants to. In a way, so do we, otherwise this show wouldn't be a thing. Both Rose and the viewer have been given a small glimpse into what the world of the Doctor is like, and for Rose, her curiosity is driving her, with very little holding her back after the first act of this episode. Whilst Rose experiences what the Doctor describes as culture shock, still trying to keep up the levity, Rose composes herself quickly and changes the subject to Mickey's status by asking if he's dead. The Doctor is caught a little off guard by this, and it's not entirely surprising. Her priority up until this point has been to understand what's been happening, and now she's swerved to asking about the people in her life that have been extortionate towards her, at least to a degree. Even now, there's still a bit of her clinging to the life she had, been reiterating that Mickey's her boyfriend. We'll return to this in a second as Plastic Mickey begins to melt, forcing the Doctor to work fast to track where it came from. In the process, we find out that the whole body is melted as well. This is a great explanation as to why it was fine for the pair to move away from the dangerous pancake maker, but this wasn't something either of them knew at the moment. At the very least, if the Doctor did know that this was going to melt, there was no saying when it would happen. They still left the thing to potentially harm others at the time they were fleeing. I suppose the get out clause would be that the Doctor considered himself important enough for the Plastic Mickey to focus on him, and it's not exactly like we don't have evidence for that, but I'm not entirely sure this guy would take the risk, especially after he rushed Rose out at the start to prevent her from being collateral damage when the bomb went off. Regardless, the TARDIS moves close to the London Eye, where Rose gets her first taste of what the blue box can do. Whilst Rose does question this, the Doctor retorts by saying that she wouldn't understand. We then get further evidence that Rose is ironically the humanizer out of the two, when she refocuses the topic on Plastic Mickey, saying that if it's still on the loose. She's starting to read the Doctor faster and faster by knowing when it's worth following a conversation, and when it's worth dropping it. For Rose, this is all brand new, but for both the audience and her, it's clear that this is ordinary for the Doctor. As a result, she deems it best to play along. The Doctor gives the response that I previously mentioned, saying that both the body and the head melted, which is really more of a lampshade of the actual issue Rose was trying to point out, but we've already addressed that. Rose then realises that she'll need to inform Mickey's mother that he might be dead, to which the Doctor acts confused. Rose acts offended that he forgot him again, to which the Doctor explains that his priorities are much bigger.
I'll have to tell his mother he's dead and you just went and forgot him again. You were right, you are alien.
Look, if I did forget some kid called Mickey...
Yeah, he's not a
it's
kid.
because I'm busy trying to save the life of every stupid ape blundering about on top of this planet, alright?
Alright?
Yes, it is!
Once again, their personalities are made clear here. Rose is focusing on the little people whilst the Doctor is focusing on the big picture. Rose then redirects their fight towards the Doctor's accent and the TARDIS's appearance. In almost a full circle from what we got during their initial meeting at Rose's apartment, Rose is now the one trying to inject levity in the situation in order to understand the Doctor more and to keep the two on the same wavelength. He's now Rose's only guide to what's happening, and she can't afford to lose that after everything that's happened. As such, she uses the Doctor's own charisma against him in order to keep the pair level with each other. Immediately afterwards, she tries to steer the topic of conversation back onto the living plastic by asking what it wants with Earth. In other words, Rose is constantly testing her boundaries with the Doctor and adjusting appropriately. The actual series of events might be a little hit and miss so far, but the character writing is fantastic, as the Doctor would put it. Speaking of the plots, yeah, let's address it.
And this living plastic, what's it got against us?
Nothing. It loves you. You got such a good planet. Lots of smoke and oil, plenty of toxins and dioxins in the air. Perfect. Just what the nesting consciousness needs. Its food stock was destroyed in the war. All its protein planets rotted. So Earth, dinner.
Any way of stopping it?
Anti-plastic.
The living plastic is here to munch on the planet and its toxins after its own food source was destroyed in an unnamed war. We don't get much of an elaboration, nor do we really get any answers as to why it was behaving the way it was beforehand. We don't even know how it transformed into a bin that it conveniently knew would be placed in front of Mickey and Rose, and that Mickey would touch it, or how it created a copy of Mickey in the process. You may think this is all rather small stuff, but let's break it down a little further before continuing. The living plastic needs to infiltrate Rose because it witnessed her communicate and even listened in on her conversations with the Doctor. So what does it do? It turns itself into a black bin. Okay, if you're not lost at this point, I don't know what to say. Does the living plastic know what a black bin is? Does it understand the concept of a bin day? What if it wasn't a bin day? Would it just sit there until it was? What if it wasn't placed outside of Mickey's car? How did it know that Mickey was going to place his hand on it? If it was after Rose, did it just take Mickey because it was convenient at the time? Does it need to be a container in order to capture and clone someone? If not, then why didn't the plastic Mickey then clone Rose as well? Even if that didn't work, it took some time to drive Rose to a pizza restaurant, so why didn't it just kidnap her then? What does it have to gain by playing the nice card? And if it did just kidnap her, then surely it could have just put her inside of another bin and cloned her. It knew where the pizza restaurant was as well, so it can extract memories from its host? If that's the case, then honestly, why didn't it just kidnap Rose and clone her? It would have all been over when it realised that she really does know nothing. Hell, if it can copy the forms of other humans, then why did it take the appearance of shop dummies? There's a reason why I've been focusing on the character work at this point, because the narrative isn't exactly strong. I don't want to defend it by saying that the answers for most of the questions asked have been left ambiguous, meaning that there's room for all this to make sense, and without the information the plot doesn't crumble entirely. It starts to limp, but I wouldn't go as far as to say that these are plot holes. Once again, the difference between a contrivance and a plot hole is more to do with one not being answered, still leaving some room for plausibility, and the other is something that destroys the narrative without a hint of repair. For example, if the answer to the question, how did it know where Mickey and Rose would be, was, it didn't, then that would be a plot hole. we still have some room to think otherwise, because that question hasn't been asked, and it hasn't been answered. Oh yeah, let's talk about the next bit. Antiplastic. Yep, as quickly as it appears, that's all the information we get. He's an alien who lives in a space-time travelling box shaped like a police box. Antiplastic could be common among his travels. I don't know. The Doctor then explains to Rose that the living plastic needs a giant dish to work as a transmitter to control the other living plastics across the world. We get another example of the Doctor thinking too big whilst Rose focuses on the immediate things in front of them when the Doctor overlooks the London Eye despite Rose pointing it out several times. We finally have our duo together in full force with a perfect reason for them to be together. The Doctor is there to focus on saving the world whilst Rose makes sure that he focuses on the little people along the way. All developed as cleanly as it could be within 30 minutes. For all this episode's shortcomings, it's hard to deny that the attention wasn't placed in the best area, the character writing. Coming up a bit short with Rose's characterizations, but we finally got there, and now the two can run off with their antiplastic and kick alien butt. Even with 10 minutes left, the episode doesn't stop showcasing this dynamic. It wears its strengths on its shoulders all the way through to the end. The pair eventually finds the Nestine consciousness, the controller of the living plastic, as Rose tells the Doctor to tip the antiplastic in and get it over with. The Doctor replies by saying that he's not there to kill it, but to give it a chance. He announces his presence and uses the laws of the Shadow Proclamation, the Space Police in other words, to converse with the consciousness. As he approaches, Rose spots Mickey as the Doctor suggests that he knew he'd be alive. Once again, it was something too small for him to draw attention to, as the situation was growing dire. Things go south rather quickly as the consciousness finds the antiplastic, assuming that the Doctor was really there to execute him. Behind the Doctor, a door slides open, and this is where another large narrative theme is introduced. The TARDIS is revealed to have been captured, and the consciousness says something to the Doctor. Granted, we can't understand, but the Doctor can, and his response opens up the floodgates for the show's biggest mystery.
Not true. I should know. I was there. I fought in the war. It wasn't my fault. Saved your world. I couldn't save any of them.
What's it doing?
The TARDIS. The Nestine's identified it as superior technology. It's terrifying. It's going to the final base. It's starting the invasion. Get out, Rose. Just let it now.
Mum? Oh, there you are. I was just going to phone. You can get compensation. I said so. I've got this document thing off the police. Don't thank me.
Where are you, Mum?
I'm in town.
No, go home. Just go home right now.
Darling, you're breaking up. Listen, I'm just going to do a bit of late night shopping. I'll see you later. Ta-ra!
Mum! Mum!
Activation signal. It's transmitting.
For long-time viewers returning to the show when the reboot aired, the image of the Doctor fighting in a war might have been an odd one. He's been known to fight previously, but only rarely did events turn sinister. Along with this, what couldn't the Doctor save multiple worlds from? The Doctor describes the consciousness as terrified just from the sheer sight of the TARDIS as the Doctor turns to Rose and tells her to run. For new viewers, they'll probably be left with the more obvious questions. Who was the Doctor before this? What was the war he fought in? And why is this episode's big bad afraid of the TARDIS? For returning viewers, they'll probably be screaming what the hell happened between Classic Who and this. Upon hearing the plastic invasion has begun, Rose's first instinct is to call her mum to get Jackie to safety. The Doctor thinks that it's already too late, whilst Rose is focusing on ensuring her mother's safety. I could keep repeating ad nauseum how this is yet more reinforcement of their characters and how it's injected into every moment it can be, providing some really strong character writing overall, but you already know that at this point. Technically I did it anyway, but let's move on, shall we? I'm not entirely convinced that Jackie would be so nonchalant about Rose screaming down the phone for her to get home. There's no reason why Jackie can't pass a shop window when the Autons are activated, but this isn't entirely out of character, just not entirely in character either. Clive is then seen at the same shopping centre as the one Jackie enters, as he realises that everything he's researched about the Doctor is true, only to be shot by an Auton moments later. Yeah, I'm not too sure he deserves that. And I'm also not sure how his wife and daughter survived the face-to-face encounter, but we didn't see how they escaped. Maybe the daughter judo kicked him or something like that. We don't get to see a lot of the attack in terms of scale, but there's enough to imply how quickly things are going bad. Interestingly, we can hear the consciousness talk for a moment as it says Time Lord, referring to the Doctor. Rose then decides to risk herself to help the Doctor in what's very clearly the climax of her origins for this show. She haphazardly swings down and knocks the Auton with the antiplastic into the consciousness as Rose, the Doctor and Mickey escape into the TARDIS. I don't really have anything wrong with this as a solution to the issue they were faced with. Rose's swing wasn't perfect, and that's kind of the point. The three are then taken back to the Palace State where Rose lives. Mickey bolts out of the TARDIS, terrified of what he's seen, whilst Rose phones her mum. With the gang all safe, Rose jokes that the Doctor would be dead if it wasn't for her, to which the Doctor responds candidly by saying he would have been. Every bit of a barrier he put up against Rose has crumbled, leading to one final question, of which the audience and Rose were waiting for. Mickey immediately throws up his bias due to the trauma he went through and tries to get Rose to stay behind. She's almost enticed to do so, but Rose continues to do what she deems best for those around her. The Doctor vanishes off disappointed, but in character he pops back with one last retort to egg her to come on board, and for the first time in the episode, Rose does something 100% for herself, by remarking that Mickey hasn't done anything for her and runs off the Doctor. All in all, it's a pretty great start to the show. We get a full arc for the Doctor and Rose, introducing them and setting up who they are and who they're going to be to each other. Plenty of great character moments to build the audience's confidence up and to make these characters both likeable and identifiable on some level. Yes, the narrative itself was rough at times, but it wasn't bad, just a bit weak in the knees. What matters is that it's done its job, and in the places where it's weak, it's still decent.